Hi. So today we're going to get into the Social Issue Book Club's session two. Yesterday we got to know Will and Skip and their parents, and we really got into understanding relationships between characters and looking at what we can learn from those relationships, and then kind of pausing and being able to kind of change our thought processes if we have like a snap judgment on a certain person, being willing to change if we see bias or having that judgment. So what we're going to talk about today is what we can learn from relationships and how people interact and what we can take from that. Okay. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is just the idea that like we all have complicated relationships. Not every relationship is going to be, puppies and rainbows. We're going to have a friend that's going to annoy us, that drives us nuts, but we know that they're always going to be there for us if we have a problem, right? Or vice versa. We have a friend who may like ignore us completely until something goes on and somebody starts treating you poorly. And that friend who you thought ignored you all of a sudden is going to be there to defend us. So like every relationship has good things and bad things about it, and people have good things and bad things about them. And so just keep in mind that every relationship has pros and cons. Okay. And the same thing is going to be true in books, especially books with realistic fiction. Authors write about these characters so that we can learn from them, and authors base these kinds of things on real life situations and problems and relationships. So, characters have relationships too, and we can learn from the positive parts and the negative parts in their relationship. Okay, so our teaching point today is that reading fiction can help people become better at relationships in their own lives. As we analyze relationships, both the positives, the good stuff, and the negatives, we learn about thinking about what makes good relationships. So if we see a negative relationship, maybe we'll think, "Ooh, I'm not going to do that." Or we see a positive relationship, we think, "I want my relationship to be just like that." Okay, so thinking about Will and Skip, what we talked about yesterday, we're going to think about our gut reaction. I know we all kind of talked about the fact that we all kind of thought it was more negative. And so just because it's a typical sibling relationship, but it will seem to focus more on the negative and how they would get at each other, and how Skip taped his head, and that wasn't the first time that he did bad things. And then Will said he always goes to mom and that kind of thing. But knowing that they're fighting more than they're kind, our gut reaction says that it's a negative relationship. So here's what we're going to learn from character relationships. So first of all, we have that gut reaction. We have that snap judgment. Is that supported by details in the story? Okay. And then we need to think about, okay, what can I learn about relationships? What can I learn about relationships with other humans, about thinking about the negative parts and the positive parts? Okay. So this we read yesterday, okay? I was sitting at my desk in my bedroom practicing my signature when my brother came in and asked me if I wanted to throw the ball around or shoot baskets. No, I said. So he looked over my shoulder at my signatures, went to the bathroom for a few seconds, came out, went to his own desk, unraveled an entire roll of Scotch tape, and stuck it to my head. Clearly this is negative, right? Skip immediately turned violent. He wasn't kind, he snapped, right? But we're going to keep going, okay? And think about what happens when Skip tries to get the tape off. Naturally, I was outraged. What'd you do that for? I asked. It was a stupid question because I knew very well why he had done it. He had done it for the same reason he had stuffed me in the laundry hamper and tied me to a chair with my best ties. He had done it because he was 14 and had the great good fortune to be blessed with a little brother he could bedevil at will. Try to get it off, he said. This I attempted to do, but he had rubbed the Scotch tape so hard into my scalp that it had become part of my head. Let me try, he said. So he tried, and I yowled, and he stopped. Then he gently pulled a piece of the Scotch tape off the side of my head, along with 6 or 7 of my temple hairs. So clearly this might mess up our thought that their relationship is a little bit negative, okay? Take a second, pause the video. What is positive here? So thinking about the positives and the negatives in stories and relationships is going to be a way to help us find positive relationships in life. Okay. It's something that we work for and something also that we should avoid. So essentially reading about characters' relationships or seeing movies with characters' relationships, it can give us kind of like a to-do list, a do's and don'ts list on how to treat people. Okay, so just a couple things, things you can do to have a positive relationship. Pay attention when someone is in trouble and show that you care. So when he yelled, his brother stopped, right? Listen to the person and try to be sure that you really hear what they're saying and stand up for someone when others are not believing in them. So when you are trying to have a good relationship with someone, you want to stand up for them. You don't want to ignore them just because somebody else is, right? And then here's our don'ts list. Don't react too quickly, and especially don't react with violence. That would be our tape there, right? Don't assume that you know exactly what's best for someone else. And don't give in to peer pressure and go with a crowd if they're being mean. And I know these are all very hard to do, but they're all good things to do, right? We can't always know what's best for someone. Having a conversation with them and maybe talking to them, sure, but you can't just assume. Remember, you need to get to know people. And as we talked yesterday, be willing to change your judgment, right? So going with that assumption all the time isn't always going to be the best plan. And then this one's a big one. Peer pressure is big, right? You guys experience that in middle school, whether it be picking on somebody or just, temptations and things like that. Don't give in to peer pressure and go with a crowd if they're treating somebody poorly, because that's not a way to build a relationship. Just because you think it makes you look cool, it's not a good way to build a relationship. So now it is your turn, okay? So what I want you to do, okay, is you're going to think about your books. Okay, we're gonna do this with our partners in class, but if you're not in class today, that's okay. I want you to do this in your reader's notebook. What I want you to do is find one relationship to study. So whether it be a mom and a son, or a boy and a girl, or whoever's in your book, I want you to find one relationship to study, and you're going to think about what is positive and negative about that relationship. Okay. So one side is for sure going to be easier to defend because that's going to be the one that's highlighted, right? Like we immediately went to the fact that their brotherly relationship wasn't great. But you need to look at both sides. And that's going to help us kind of create our do's and don'ts list for how to treat people, right? So in your notebook, find a way to find a relationship and talk about this is great and this is not so great. Be able to support it with quotes and specific details. Okay. Just like when he yelled and he stopped, right? Okay. And then what we're also going to do, so pause the video. And then when you come back, what we're also going to do is we're going to add this line down here. We started this chart yesterday in class. This line here is going to be added to our notebooks. It says weigh relationships for positive and negative sides. Think about do's and don'ts. And so add that to your list from your notebook from yesterday. So go ahead and pause the video and do that. And then the last thing we're going to do today is open up our social issue notebooks or social issue book club books, and we're going to start reading. I think a lot of us are loving our books, which is wonderful. It makes me happy. And what I want you to do is don't forget to jot. I saw a lot of us just get sucked in, which is wonderful, but jotting is what's going to also help us learn from our characters because it helps us keep track of our thoughts. So jot notes about relationships. You guys were taking notes on Thursday with session 1, right? Jot notes about those relationships, but then also write, okay, this is positive, but this is negative. And you can even use a little plus sign and a little minus sign, however you want to do it. But make sure that you're taking notes while you read. Okay. All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys.